Hey y'all, welcome to Chill Chats, the Chill Counseling Team podcast, your space for real conversations about all things wellness, from joy to pain to sunshine to rain. We're therapists, but this podcast isn't therapy and it isn't a substitute for professional care. Even if you are a Chill Counseling client, what we share here is for conversation, not counseling. Take what resonates, leave what doesn't, and if you need support, reach out to a professional. Now, let's get into it. Today, I'm introducing Eboni Person, LMFT Associate, the newest member of the Chill Counseling team and the first LMFT Associate I've ever supervised. In this episode, we're talking about borderline personality disorder, or BPD, and relationships. What BPD actually is, how it impacts connections, and what both partners can do to navigate challenges in a healthier way when one of them has BPD. BPD is often misunderstood, especially online, so we're breaking down the facts, addressing the stigma, and offering real insight from a therapist's perspective. Content warning: this episode includes discussions about emotional dysregulation, relationship challenges, and other content related to BPD. Please listen with care, take a break if you need to, or listen later when you have the capacity. Let's get started. Here's my conversation with Eboni Person, LMFT Associate, on BPD and relationships. Hey, Eboni. Welcome
Hi.
to the podcast.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to talk to you today. So you are the newest person on the Chill Counseling team as of today. You started a couple weeks ago, but in this moment, you are the newest person. And you're also very special because you are the very first LMFT associate that I've supervised. So even though I've supervised like a dozen or so counselor interns, you're the first LMFT associate. So, this is a new step for me too, even though it's also a new part of your journey.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. Well, so you've already been to a team meeting or two, and you know that we do sunshine and rain and some type of fun question. And in the team meeting, we tend to do like sunshine as the high point of our week and rain as the low point of our week. But today, I want to know your sunshine being like your favorite part about being a therapist, and your rain being the most challenging part of being a therapist. Then the fun question is going to be, what is something you think I would be surprised to know about you?
Okay. All right. So my sunshine, I'd say, would be just getting to work with clients, getting to know them, getting to walk beside them, being able to figure out the ways that they want to improve and working with them to meet those goals. And when I see those changes and I see that growth, I'd say that's the highlight. And then the rain would be sometimes you hear some things from clients and you really get an idea of how tough life really is, and it's a lot of weight to carry those emotions. And I think that's a challenge to hear, as well as to balance, when I am going through my own personal challenges and the challenges of my clients, and wanting to find a way to be there for myself and be there for them simultaneously.
Oh, that's so real because we're still living life like as we're helping other people navigate theirs. And so sometimes there are things that happen behind the scenes, and trying to make sure you take care of yourself while you're encouraging them to do the same thing definitely does take some balance.
For sure, for sure. And
Yeah.
then you said something that you wouldn't
That
think
you,
I
yeah, something you think that I would be surprised to learn about you.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So I feel like I generally come off to people as pretty introverted, quiet, reserved. And so people generally are surprised to find out that I'm a rhythm skater, which basically means I dance on skates and I do it publicly. So I'm a pretty good performer, is what I'm saying. So people are generally
What?
shocked to find out that I'm putting on a show while I'm wearing my skates.
Okay, well, you were right. I did not know that. I had no idea. But now, like, seeing you with like the headphones, I don't know, I'm getting like this image of like the cool girl on the skates. So, like, yeah, that's super cool. We'll have to like see you perform in some kind of way. Or maybe we can bring some like
Definitely. Yes, yes.
therapy and skating. I don't know. Like,
I'm
I don't
sure
know.
an opportunity will present itself. I will be happy to skate for you all.
I
I'm
love
also a teacher.
that.
I give lessons.
Okay, I'm coming to Houston because I would love to. I haven't skated for real since I was a child, and I tried to in the pandemic, and I was like, okay, these muscles are a little different. So, yeah, I might have to come talk to you. So thank you for sharing that. And now we know a little bit about like the skating, but I want to know a little bit more about you as a therapist. So tell us a little bit about what made you decide to pursue this as a career.
Sure. It started off, I'd say, probably in my undergraduate career. I started studying psychology, and it initially began as this urge to sort of want to help people. And then as time went on and I started to recognize some of my own mental health struggles, it also became an opportunity for me to get to know myself better. And in getting to know myself better, I think that desire to want to learn more and to want to see what it means to be a therapist grew. After college, I was working in case management and I was primarily working with at risk youth. And I remember just having this feeling of like, I want to help, but I don't have the tools to help. I don't have all of the techniques or the education that I really need to provide the care that I want to provide. And so I decided I'd go back and get my master's and I would study counseling psychology. And then from there, I decided I'd focus on marriage and family therapy specifically. Um, and it was really just motivated by my desire to help out those kids that I was working with.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, I love hearing everybody's pathways because we all have different stories, but I think everyone says something about wanting to help and like this just this seeming to be an impactful way to, you know, change lives really or help people change their lives. So that makes sense. And you decided to pursue marriage and family therapy. So a lot of times people just say, "Oh, I need to see a counselor, I need to see a therapist," and they don't realize that we actually have different disciplines within. So you've got like LPC, you've got social work, you've got marriage and family therapy, psychology, and so on. And so tell us a little bit about like why you chose to be a marriage and family therapist, even and like what value that adds, even when you work with individuals.
Right. So even when I'm working with individuals, I'm looking at the whole person. And I don't mean just them as an individual, but I'm looking at their environment. I'm looking at their genetics. I'm looking at their culture. And I feel like studying marriage and family therapy allowed me to do that. We look at the entire system and not just the person. And I find that that helps me understand people the most.
Yeah, I love that. It's so true. I think a lot of times, especially in Western culture, is like very individualistic. And so we're so zoomed in and we think about so much of psychology just being about, and not all of it, obviously, but like so much of what people know on the outside for sure is about like you and your personality and, you know, your attachment and your, you know, your things. And yeah, marriage and family therapy, you really are trained to look at the entire system, whether that's like relational or beyond that, going all the way to like political to historical and so on. So,
Right.
yeah, it's definitely a lot that you get to add to your work with like any client, whether that's individual, couples, and so on. Yeah, so today we are talking about borderline personality disorder and relationships. And I want to talk about this a little bit more before we dive in, just because with borderline, a lot of, well, you know, like right now, there are a lot of different labels that people throw around on the internet, and there's a lot of self diagnosing or other people diagnosing on TikTok, on Reddit, and so on. And so, can you talk a little bit about what borderline personality is?
Sure. And to your point, social media has been, I think, both a positive and a negative when it comes to understanding mental health. I think it's awesome that people are finding avenues to learn more and finding avenues to maybe identify some of the things going on with them through the internet and finding ways to connect with others who may be going through some of the same things. But I also think that it is important to remember that borderline personality disorder is just that. It's a personality disorder. It's not something that someone can just diagnose on their own, which is not to say that someone can't be right in suspecting that they or someone else may have this disorder, but it is important to go to a licensed professional and figure out if that person meets criteria for this diagnosis so that they can properly get the care that they may need and the support that they may need to work with some of the challenges that come with having borderline personality disorder, which also is called BPD. And one of the main challenges that comes with having BPD is emotional dysregulation, which is something that people on social media are talking a lot about lately. And we're talking about changes in mood and maybe emotional instability. But that being said, everyone who may struggle with dysregulation doesn't necessarily have BPD.
That's a great point. Great point. I, as we said, like we know that there are some people who may get their information from social, and also, you know, we can honor the the impact of that, like the helpfulness of people sometimes going, "Oh, that might be me." And a licensed professional is needed to diagnose. And so, coming from you, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what the features of BPD are. So, like, what are some, whether someone is trying to figure out if they may have it, or someone may have it, or just wants to know a little bit more. Yeah, talk to us about it.
One of the main things, emotional dysregulation. And along with that, there's this distorted sense of reality. Someone with BPD may have emotional dependence. And then on the extreme end, there could even be self-harm or suicidal ideation. So when you have those type of symptoms in an individual, you can imagine how they might play out in partner relationships. So that distorted sense of reality, when it comes to conflict or misunderstandings amongst the partners, what may be a quick conversation can turn into emotional outbursts. It can turn into what looks like jealousy or maybe misunderstandings or misperceptions on like what is jealousy. There's some impaired judgment there for the person with BPD. Another thing is impulsive behavior is another feature of BPD. So when within the relationship, that could turn into cheating on a partner or breaking up with the partner prematurely or canceling big plans or breaking agreements out of anger or in a state of emotional dysregulation.
Mm.
And something you might see a lot on social media is something called BPD rage. There are quite a few social media users who are talking about their experiences with having BPD, and they'll describe the type of rage they feel. And a lot of what people will say is that when they're in the rage, like the rage is the first thing they feel. And after the rage, they kind of recognize that there are other feelings going on, which is maybe a sense of betrayal or a sense of sadness or a sense of confusion. And within that rage, they may say or do things that they don't feel like align with who they are as a person, but they find this inability to stop themselves. And then afterwards, looking back in hindsight, they can see that, um, that they were in a dysregulated state.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that because as you were talking about that, I'm like, yeah, like that's the dysregulation. Whenever we look back and we're like, oh, I wasn't myself, it's because, and maybe we just need to do like a whole episode about dysregulation in general. But it's like, yeah, you weren't yourself because the part of your brain that makes you you, like all this good front stuff, it's off. Like the part that's active is really just the survival parts of your brain. So yeah, we go into that fight or flight, and that can include rage. It makes sense.
For sure. And as we know, you don't have to have BPD to be in a dysregulated state. And what we'll also see is that the partners of those with BPD will also become dysregulated. As the partner with BPD is experiencing emotional dysregulation, those interactions with their partner puts the other partner in a dysregulated state. They're feeling intense, anxiety and confusion. And some of the things they do to react to that are dysregulated. And when they look back at some of the fears and the level of fear that they had in those moments, they may recognize that they too were dysregulated as a result.
Wow. That's the system again. Like we're looking at the interaction where you don't have to pinpoint somebody as wrong, but you just see how it happened.
For sure.
And I'm curious about like your own decision to specialize because a lot of times with personality disorders, like it gets diagnosed at the psychology level, to, like with a licensed psychologist, but also a lot of times treated at that level. So they're obviously like you are not the only person at the master's level licensure that treats BPD, but there's stigma attached to it, to where there are many people who don't and refer out often. So can you tell me a little bit about like your decision to specialize, and then also speak to that stigma?
Yeah. And I think that, yes, you're right. A lot of people will refer it out. I think that that has to do with the stigma. And then it probably has to do with some of the real issues that come along with having BPD. My interest in it is, I guess, academic as well as personal. Like I have a desire to learn more about this disorder. You know, and it's wide. The way the symptoms present varies from person to person. So you can take a lot of time to study this disorder and still not know everything. So that in part is my desire. And then also it's a personal desire. I've had people in my life who I love dearly who have had this diagnosis. And because of having those close relationships with those people, as I have the desire to kind of humanize and destigmatize them.
I can really appreciate that. And I know, in the trauma world, a lot of us are talking about BPD as really complex PTSD. Like in the next DSM, it's very possible that it won't be listed as a personality disorder, and it'll be recognized for what we know about it, which is that a lot of times it develops in response to trauma, attachment trauma, right? And so I think that also would help with destigmatizing, when you realize it's not some like personality flaw as some people might see it. And though it may still have the impact that you spoke to, that might lead to some of the stigma, as far as like how people experience people with BPD in relationships, it's also, it's not a decision. And just like we can empathize with people that have a physical condition, or even now as we learn more and people are more aware of the presence of anxiety and depression, just how widespread it is, I think maybe understanding more will help.
I definitely agree. And I think to your point, it's definitely not a decision. People aren't choosing to have BPD. It is a result of trauma. A lot of research says that it could be adverse childhood experiences or this like these recurrent experiences of someone feeling like their emotions aren't being heard, their needs aren't being met, and there is debate on whether or not it is a true personality disorder or if it's a form of CPTSD. But I think, regardless of the label that it's given, it's important that we understand it is rooted in trauma. And it's not like, you know, something one time happened to someone. It is a, you know, recurrent experience. It's things that built up over time, and then usually after sometime after the age of 18, these symptoms of BPD, you know, present in someone.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that. I do think that with the conversation around labels, it goes back to what we just talked about with social media. Sometimes people are just looking for answers, and labels help create answers for some people. And also with that, I think you saying that it doesn't matter what the label is. What we do know is that ultimately there's trauma. And I think again that gives us an opportunity to empathize. Like, this isn't a person that is intentionally dysregulated. It's a person who has had more than one, as you said, has had recurring experiences of being dysregulated in response to something, and so it may be more difficult now.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
And another thing that individuals with BPT struggle with is to, as we said, to regulate their emotions and also to sometimes be able to decipher what level of reaction that they should have to when their emotions are invalidated or when they're dealing with conflict. So sometimes we see responses that seem bigger than they ought to be, and that plays a role into how the emotions are feeling internally for them. So what they're feeling internally is coming out externally in how they react to things.
So I imagine that with that, that would make relationships difficult. So can you talk a little bit about that and what that could look like?
Sure. So because of the emotional instability that individuals with BPD often experience, that plays out in their relationships. So sometimes within those relationships, you'll see these really high highs and then these really low lows. And moods have the potential to rapidly shift. And so that means within the partnership, those moods can rapidly shift. They may find themselves drawn to someone and have these intense feelings of love. And then conflict may occur. And then they may feel intense feelings of hatred or this strong desire to withdraw completely from the relationship. And it turns into this push pull dynamic of them, reaching out for closeness with their partner and then withdrawing from vulnerability, withdrawing from conflict. And sometimes it's in the extreme.
Yeah. Yeah. So knowing that those are some things that can happen, what are some recommendations that you would have for partners of people with BPD?
I think that for both partners and specifically for the partner without BPD to truly understand that, this is a mental health struggle that their partner has. And so to be in a relationship with someone with this diagnosis, it is important to understand it and know in a sense what you're signing up for. To stay in the relationship, it is going to require patience. It's going to require them to support their partner, but also having a partner with the symptoms that comes along with having BPD can be a lot for a partner. And so it's important for them to be able to set healthy boundaries with their partner and to know, where there's a line, know when it's time to stay and know potentially when it's time to leave.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. How, I guess, as for the person, so one of the things that comes up a lot when we talk about BPD is boundaries. What would you recommend to maybe the partner with BPD and to the partner without BPD in terms of setting and maintaining boundaries?
Right. So for the partner with BPD, one of the ways to begin to regulate emotions is by setting healthy boundaries. So that may mean taking space when space is needed. If the alternative is an emotional outburst within the partnership, let's take some space. Let's sort through these emotions. Let's come back. Let's have a conversation. And the same goes for the person, the partner without BPD. They both would need to set healthy boundaries to make sure that they're not ending up in what could potentially become an emotionally abusive relationship. Having this disorder can open someone up to being a victim of abuse, but it could also open someone up to being the perpetrator of abuse. So it's important to work through the steps to find ways to properly cope and set those boundaries. And ways to figure that out can be through individual therapy. It's important for both parties to be working on their individual mental health. Another option is also couples therapy. And when it comes to the partner with BPD, DBT is one of the premier forms of therapy that's recommended. And for some, depending on the symptoms and the level of symptoms that are presented, psychiatric treatment is even recommended.
Okay. Yeah. So that means that someone could come to you if they are trying to navigate the different challenges that come with BPT. A couple could come to you as well. I guess a partner also could come to you if they were wanting some support in navigating the relationship. But you could work with both partners in couples therapy as well.
Correct.
Wow. Okay. I mean, there are not a lot, even when I think about the people who do work with BPD, I don't know that, well, I do know that there's a smaller subset of therapists that do the couples work. So I think your point about how, due to those challenges, it could turn into a very tumultuous and even abusive dynamic. That's really important, and being able to navigate that piece in therapy, just very critical.
Right. And something that interests me is that couples who have BPD are sometimes sort of magnets for each other in that their mental health struggles sometimes attract them to each other. So the type of person with BPD may be drawn to a certain personality, and the personality of someone without BPD might be drawn to the type of personality of an individual with BPD, which is not necessarily always a bad thing. It can be what makes them compatible, but it can also lead to maladaptive dynamics. When we think about attachment theory, oftentimes an individual with BPD may have a disorganized attachment, and then the partner of the person who has BPD may also have a disorganized attachment, or even more likely, an anxious attachment style. And so they're drawn to each other. It's as if the other has what the other doesn't, and so they kind of fit together. But then when the partner with BPD is emotionally dysregulated, those highs and those lows, that push and pull, can dysregulate the partner who is anxiously attached. That partner with the anxious attachment may then lean in more and reach out more for reassurance and for closeness, which can cause the partner with BPD to retreat or to lash out. Um, that can then impact the other partner's feelings of self-worth, and it might spark their desire to save or rescue their partner, to try whatever they can to get that closeness and, return to a state of regulation. And that in return, in the cycle, can cause the partner with BPD to withdraw even further.
Wow. I love that you brought attachment into it because I know that's one of your other specialty areas. And as I said before, there could be attachment trauma that is sort of like the one, at least part of the foundation of BPD showing up. So that seems super important to like be knowledgeable about and to bring up here. So what are some recommendations that you have for how a couple could create a healthier dynamic if one of them does have BPD?
Right. I think being that both um, could likely be having mental health struggles, it is important for them to prioritize their own individual mental health. But for them to be a couple, it also needs to be a priority for them to work together, to find ways to support each other. I think they're going to have to find a balance to get out of that cycle. The partner with BPD is going to have to find ways to be able to self regulate, just as the partner without BPD is going to have to find ways to self regulate, so that when triggers arise, they can better process through those triggers without the risk of constantly triggering each other. And I think that it's okay to ask for help. I think it is a lot to take on by yourself. And so that's where that therapy piece comes in, of seeking out additional help and going through the steps to learn how to regulate those emotions and how to work through conflicts in ways that don't go to the extreme, like emotional outbursts or jumping straight to a breakup. And because it is cyclical, oftentimes breakups, they happen, but then the two come back together and then the cycle starts back over.
Yeah, that's so helpful. And I really can tell that you are trained in marriage and family therapy and systems because the way that you talk about it, there's so much focused on like the interactions and the processes and in the relationship. And so you're looking at it as a system where it's not this is a person that has a problem. Like you're not saying the person with BPD is the problem. This is where the issue is in the relationship. You're looking at like you're zooming out and you're like, well, these are the dynamics. This is what happens. Like the disorder itself is a result of like this other system, and now in this system this is how it looks. And I think that's so helpful and humanizing and empathetic and compassionate. So I look forward to supporting you behind the scenes, as you help so many different people navigate this.
Yeah, I think it is important to humanize, and I don't think that negates some of the harm that can happen within these dynamics. But when we think of these couples who are in relationship with each other, they're in relationship for a reason. Like, they do have a desire to be together. And so when a couple's in front of you and they're telling you why they love the other, I think it's important, again, to look at the whole picture. So maybe not just looking at some of those toxic or maladaptive things, but looking at some of the things that give them strength and some of the things that they have that work for them.
I can see how this would translate to your work with any couple, honestly. Like you being able to say, okay, yeah, you're coming in because something is challenging. Like, obviously, there's a reason you're sitting here in front of me. And also, there's a reason you're together because if it were just problems, you could just walk away. You wouldn't be, on the couch, right? So,
Right.
um, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think people really do need that, like that non-judgmental, empathetic heart, honestly, to approach this. And we talked about the stigma before, so it's a big deal that you can zoom out and see, but also like zoom back in and feel and connect. And like I'm in awe personally. I really mean that.
Yeah, and I think it's important for individuals with BPD or for couples coming in who have this pairing to know that there is hope. That the answer is not just, oh, you should probably just be single for the rest of your life. Or no, like, yes, this is difficult, and no, what's going on right now is not the best way to deal with it, but there's hope. We can figure out ways for this to be healthy.
Yeah. That's a great way for us to end. There's hope. But that said, are there any other things that you think people should know, whether it's a person with BPD or the loved one of someone with BPD, or possibly a clinician who may have clients that have BPD?
Um, Yeah, the first thing being, yeah, there is hope. There's no cure, there's no A plus B equals C, but that doesn't mean that things can't get better and that things can't be healthy. And I also think that it's important, if you are someone who's like on social media and you're noticing that these symptoms and you feel like you recognize it in yourself or even in your partner, I think it's important to, if it's your partner, you know, have an open conversation with your partner. If it's you, take the time to learn a little more. And then, as I mentioned in the beginning, um, it can only be diagnosed by a qualified professional. Um, and then working with a qualified professional, you can figure out some of the tools that you need to get to where you want to be in that relationship if you decide to stay in that relationship.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so if someone is looking for you, someone wants to, come into your office or virtual office maybe, for individual or couples therapy or family therapy, or if they are a clinician and they want to refer someone to you or consult with you, how do they get in touch?
Sure. All of my information is on the Chill Counseling website. My name, my bio, how to get in contact with me is there. I'm also on Psychology Today, and I'm also on Instagram. My Instagram is at Liberated Living. That's living without the G at the end.
I love it. Come on, liberated living. All right, so if you want to live liberated, reach out to Ebony. You can check her out on the Instagram. She's connected to the Chill Instagram as well, Chill at Chill Counseling, and yeah, our website. And then you do a free 15-minute consultation. So if you're like, okay, I like what she's got going on here, but let me see her vibe one on one or two on one, then definitely like reach out and book that free 15-minute consultation. And this might be your therapist. So
Yes.
thank you
Thank you so
so
much.
much. All right, until next time.
All right. Till next time.